Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone. We actually have our last session of the day and last session of the conference here. We're very pleased to have Bob Ellington. He's going to be presenting on creating ITSM relationships to custom forms. Now, Bob's been a Remedy developer for many years, and he's spent about 10 years doing some very intensive work at his current employer. So with that, Bob, I'm going to thank you for your participation and your support in this conference and allow you to go ahead and present. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. And since several Remedy developers that have gotten up here have wanted to brag about their first version that they worked on and how long they've been doing it. When I first took a job to do Remedy, I didn't even know what Remedy was. I changed employers, take this new job, you're gonna do Remedy. Like, okay, fine. It's just another language, right? Well, was doing VB and COBOL and all this for years. No, it's completely different. And so the very first week I got there, they said, we need you to upgrade from Remedy 3.5 to version 4. I didn't know what Remedy was. So this was in 99. So I've been doing Remedy since 99 and worked through every single version up that chain to basically almost where we are now. I'm trying to get to the Kubernetes piece. But
well, and truth told, Bob, the very first version of Remedy you saw was not Remedy. It was Baystone.
Well, and that was the thing. We were running Baystone. We weren't running Remedy, and that was the ugliest thing I ever saw. And I thought they needed to replace this product. This is garbage. And so I went to training, and I ended up in training with Lenny. And I was sitting in there, and I went, I can do this. I could replace that whole system we got in a week by doing this. And so I fell in love with Remedy at that point. So, all right. So we're in here to talk about making relationships to custom forms and being able to see them on your ITSM. So here's the problem. You have created a custom form. You'd like to relate it to ITSM. You'd like for the ITSM record to show the relationship to your custom form. I'm meaning in the relationships tab. You sit there and you relate a CI, you relate a change request to an incident or so forth. You see it right in there in that list. So I want to see it in that list. I didn't want to make a whole custom tab for relationships to my custom things. I wanted it right there like everything else. You'd like to be able to relate your custom form from that change request or that incident, as well as be in your custom form and relate a CRQ or an incident to it. Bidirectional doing of the relationship on it. So first thing you've got is that out of the box relationships are provided between the ITSM forms and other ITS forms and CIs, change, incident, which is help desk, problem investigation, work order, and you see them right there in your relationships tab. And when you want to create a new relationship scenario for your custom thing, the first thing you're going to need to do is to create a new relationship association form. Now, I recommend you do it that way. There's already an out-of-the-box one for HPD Help Desk Association. There's one for Change Association. You're going to use those forms in order to make things present in the out-of-the-box, but don't write special workflow off of those forms and push your data into it. Make your own association form. One of the main reasons that I wanted to do that was to be able to write reports and not have to sift through all of the relationship records that were out there that might be related to a change request in order to find what I'm looking for. I can go look at my association and, yep, that thing is related to a change. Here it is, real quick. So the other thing you're going to need to do is you've got to add an option to that pull down choice. It's down at the bottom. So we choose search, right? And you got to make it open a relationship build dialog. And then you've got to actually create the relationship records. So like I said, one of the first things you're going to do is create a new relationship form, an associations form. What I did here is I duplicated from the HPD associations form, I duplicated the structure of the fields over here. Now, one of the things I ran into the first time I did it, I just totally forgot that there's always something hard coded back there that makes it stay part of the application that you took it from. So I didn't want that happening, because I was not putting it in. I didn't want my new custom stuff to be part of their application and get it stuck in there. So essentially what I did is I then highlight them all, copy, and then pasted them onto my new form, eliminating the core fields when bringing it over. And so then I knew I had fields that kind of mapped very cleanly to their associations. When you get in looking at it, every one of the associations are very, very similar in their structure. There's minor differences when you're dealing with the work order associations, but if you take this help desk one and use it to create your form of an association form, it covers everything that happens in all the associations. Okay. So then the next thing you need to do is create a new request type value for it. And I highly recommend you, when you create it, you create an ID number that's really high range. And you see here, I went to 680,000 because they went straight to 99,000. I don't know where they're going from there, what else is going to come. So I took it way on up there. Hopefully I'm clean and they won't hit me for a long time, but you never know. So that's something you got to keep an eye on and think about down the road for it. So this is on my custom new association form that I'm putting this value here to begin with. But then I need to create a new relationship option record. There's a form out of the box called sys request types. And back there, they have information defining all of their forms that can be used in those pull downs that you're looking at, that, say it's a CI or a change or an incident, those kind of forms. There's entries back there. So I figured out I was going to need an entry for that in order for that pull down to work. Because when you go looking at the menu for the pull down on the incident or change form, it's pulling data from this form to get there. And I thought, great, BMC's done a great job. They've now made this all data driven. This is going to be really easy to work with. So I found a record and I just used the regular ARS style report and exported all the data. So I had a structure in order to go fill in my own record for my new form I'm going to relate to come back and import into this. So from there in the CSV file, you have to modify the fields I got highlighted here for it. So you got to modify the related on form name to be to match the associations form that you've created. You have to modify the request type and put for the value and for the description to match the text you used in that request type field where we added the 680,001 record, right? All of that has to match for it. Then you have to modify the selection code, the column M over here, to put that number in there and make it match. Then you got to create a new instance ID because you don't want to accidentally overwrite an instance ID record that's already in sys request types. That was not hard to do. I just went to a record that had nothing to do with sys request types and grabbed a GUID value and stuck it in here. So that's unique to the sys request types. When I'm loading it, I know that, I could take an instance ID off of CI and use it because it's not going to match the value that's in sys request types because they generate unique values anyway. And so from that perspective, it really doesn't matter if it's a number that's used somewhere else in the system. As long as it's not used in sys request types, you don't have a problem with it. And so you put that value in there. And then you go import this record into sys request types. But what that's going to do is it's going to make your form be valid at the same level as the change and the incident piece of it. But the next piece is you've got to build an association in there between the work order, the incident, the problem, the change, and that new entry you just created. So then you got to look in the form in the sys request types and find, for example, here work order. And you click the new button down here to make a new association to it. So when you get the association entry form up, you click the ellipse button and get a list of associated to form names, and your new form should be in that list because you've already imported that record into sys request types. So you go down and pick that record and you click OK. The next piece you got to remember to do is to set the status to enabled. It does not set to that immediately, and I did not find a clean way to get back to it to change it after the fact. So I ended up blowing away records and starting over the first time or two I went through this. So now it's in your pull down because you've added it into that form back there. So your new form is in there, and you see my CSUNS notification service is in the list. But unfortunately, that's not the only place you got to put it. So even though BMC went data driven, they still keep a request type field. And yeah, you see where it's kind of highlighted and how it's kind of buried down here. But there's a record type field up there that still is an enumerated field that relates to what you just pulled down that came from that record. And that's why that record had that number in it. It's taking that number and matching it and sticking it temporarily in this record type field, this enumerated field. If you don't have a value in that matches what was in your pull down, it won't function. Nothing will work. Okay. So you've got to add a new value to the out of the box associations form. So if you're going to make an association that is going to relate, in this example here, to work order, you got to get on the work order association form and add your new entry with your very high number, because that over there has an enumerated value in it too, and it's looking for it to be valid. They'll throw an error if it's not in there. And you have to build a search dialog form to handle your own processing, to find your record out of your custom form, because nothing out of the box knows what your form looks like for it. So whenever you end up picking your form name, and I'm gonna have to do what Jason did in the last one and get it where you can see it. Whenever you're picking your form name down here in this list and you click this button, you want your dialog to pop up. Okay. And so what I did here is you got to make sure you add the fields you think will be helpful for your search on doing this. This case here, we're looking for a location relationship kind of piece of information for it. So you put the fields you need on there, and you build active links behind the scenes to handle the clear all function, to handle the search function, which what happens with the search function is I run through some routines to build a query string and stick it in a hidden field behind the scenes, because they may only fill in one of these fields. They may fill in none of these fields, and you want your search to be able to work, and you just make the table look to that behind the scenes field for its criteria for how to find it on there. And the other pieces you want to be able to do is build workflow around all the other buttons on that form. So you see here, that I had all these different admin tabs that carried data. I wasn't sure what all data I would need, so I kept a lot of copies from my associations form and so forth to try to figure out what I really needed to work with. So I actually, in this example, have fields I don't even use up here. But when you're trying to work it out and figure it out, you put more than you need sometimes back there on the admin tabs to figure it out. So in the end, you need the fields that you need to identify the form name, to call the dialogue, the record ID from the calling record, and other information needed to complete the relationship record build on it. So in the end, you need to know what two forms am I relating for it. You need to know what are the record IDs of each of the two records I'm trying to relate, and that kind of thing. And so that's some of the workflow you're going to build. So here I'm talking about that qualification field. You got to build active links that create that search criteria. It needs to build upon itself in there. So if they fill in field 1, is part of it is to say, you know, where field equals this. If they don't fill in field 2 or 3 in the example I'm giving, you don't let that build in there. But if they've had something in it, you got to stick an and statement and keep going from there. And depending on how you define some of the fields on the front, if it's a hard pull down, you can do an equals. But if it's a text field that they type in, you got to do a like. So you got to look at all of that when building your search criteria. Okay. Then you want to build active links that push the selected record to the new association form you created. And that needs to fire on the relate button. And the other piece that I did here with it is it not only fires on the relate button to relate the one I've got highlighted, but I have it defined where if I relate 10 records, hit the relate button, it loops and will do all 10 relationships in one shot, kind of thing.
Why are you using a custom association form instead of just the out of the box one?
I'm going to get there in a minute. Okay. So then you build filter workflow on the custom association form so that it can know, based on what you just associated, whether to write it to the change form or whether to write it to the change association form, or to write a copy to the work order association or the incident association or the problem association. And so that's just 4 simple filters that you do over here. But then you come back with a delete function. What you want to do from a delete function is flag your custom record for delete and then let it go find the one in the other system. That is a lot of workflow I didn't want to risk on the out of the box form. I'd rather risk that workflow being over on my custom form.
So you're using the custom form as a staging form.
But actually from my real custom form, I use my custom associations form to show the relationships. And so I get to see the change, the incident, the problem, and the work order all in there in one shot. Whereas if I did what over just using their associations, I'd have to show you 4 tables.
Gotcha.
That makes sense? Okay. So then you build workflow to call the search dialog, and that's an active link that on the search button, it kicks off and calls the guides to do the searches, and then tells it, an active link in there will refresh the table at the end of it after you've built the query. Okay. So then you got to build workflow for the delete. So there's I call it the red minus button, even though the minus isn't red. I don't know a better way to describe it. But we've all seen the thing up there. So I had to put an active link on that sat there and said, okay, we need to pop up. You've got to highlight a record that you want to delete. Click that button. There's some out of the box pieces that I call off of that says, hey, do you really want to delete this? I let that continue to be do the same process for mine. I didn't have to reinvent that wheel for it. And now it handles, if you answer yes, it handles doing a push to my custom associations form, flagging it for delete, which then kicks off the filters that go clean up the other associations table as well, delete it from there, and physically delete both records. Okay. So you also have the scenario that you want to be able to view the relationship, the record that's related to it. So if you're in the change form, you're in the work order form or whatever, you double click on that related record, you expect the record to open. If you double click an incident, the incident opens. If you double click a CI, the CI opens. So you want the same thing to happen with your custom form. And it's just one simple active link that's looking for a double click action. That's the way they did it with theirs, because the table is, you don't want it to open the associations form. You want it to go to the record that you're connected to. And then the next piece you do is test, test, test. You've got to come up with all the different combinations. The issue was more around my search functions and getting all of that to work the way I wanted it to, than it was about making it write the records. Those turned it out to be pretty simple. You just look at an existing record in the change associations form. Okay, this is where they're writing the change numbers, and this is where they're writing the related record numbers. Make sure you're pushing to those particular fields properly. But it's very easy to get yourself confused of which one's form 1 versus form 2 everywhere. And that's why you got to do a whole bunch of testing to make sure it all works and it looks just right going through it. You got to verify that the relate action pushes correctly to the new form, and that the filter workflow on the new form pushes to the correct associations form in the correct fields on those. And then you want to turn around and use test accounts and give them the permissions that you expect your users to use in your new custom form to make sure it works bidirectionally for them. So when I'm on my custom form, when I bring up the dialog to relate a change or an incident, I go kind of raw. I have a pull down and I say, change infrastructure change. I just use the form name in the list. HPD help desk, WOI work order. I put that right in there. They pick that, and then I tell them to put in a partial number, and then I do a query for it, and then they can relate that record from that direction. It does the exact same thing, writes the exact same record to my new custom form, and I don't have to have different filters. It's exactly the same filters I did when I came from the work order form to begin with for it. So this slide deck is up on your Google Drive. And okay, let me do my reminders and then I'll get to that. So reminders, you got to create a new relationship form. You got to create a new relationship option record. Then you create a new association entry for it. You got to relate your new relationship option record to change, to incident, to problem, etc. You got to set new request type entries in the search pull down. You got to modify that request type on the ITSM forms. You got to add the new request type to any of the out-of-the-box associations. You got to build a search dialog. You got to build the search dialog workflow, build filter workflow in the custom association form, build workflow to call the search dialog, build workflow to do the delete event, test like crazy, and then build workflow to view that relationship record. And yes, I'd test again after that too for it. And so in conclusion, you can build relationships on ITSM forms to custom forms. They'll display in that relationships tab. And then you can make your custom workflow fire on that custom associations form to update the correct ITSM associations form. And then making this function requires you add those new data records to the sys request types back there. When I went to move this from dev to prod, the beauty was I went into the sys request types record exported it as an ARX at that point, and I went into the sys request types association or whatever it was called. I forget the name now already. And I pulled those relationship records that I built that put my form to the change to the work order, et cetera. Pulled those to ARXs, imported those in prod, and that was clean. But building that first one, you've got to kind of do it in that CSV file for it. And this does require you to put things in the overlay. And that was frustrating because I hadn't done, I've had this system, it's now 11 years we've been running this. And I had 0 overlays on the problem investigation. And I had to make one to do this because of their stupid little field that they had behind the scene. But it's okay. That's the only thing I have on there modified. I know where that is, and that's not a big deal for me. But one of the things I wanted to say is this slide deck is up on the Google Drive for you. And I don't know if you noticed it back here. Get back to it. On this one right here, down at the bottom, right here, I actually have the CSV file for you with that entry in it that you got right here. So you'll be able to modify it. You probably want to stick your own login name in there instead of mine. Hey, BMC has some of their people's login names and records, so big deal if mine goes out forward, right? Because it really didn't care who did it in the end for it. But that's, I give you that CSV so that you don't have to go rebuild the CSV and get the structure just right on it. So yeah, I told you the way to go get it and build it yourself, but at the same time, I'm giving you the CSV in there. Any questions? Did I lose anybody in the middle of that?
Not a question, but a comment. If you ever want to relate work orders to releases, you have to go through the same process.
Correct.
Because it's not built out of the box.
Yeah. And so the comment was that if you wanted to build work orders to releases, that's not there out of the box. And so you have to go through this very same process in order to do it. So while technically it's not to your custom form, the idea is to build a custom relationship type to in there. This is the process you got to go through to do it.
Between work orders and releases.
Well, and there are probably some other things that you would sit there and say, well, I'd like to relate this to a change request or something that even is an out of the box as well piece over there. This is what you'd have to do to do it.
For work order release, everything, every step you did except for the.
Okay. And like I say, for me, the new form, it solved that one problem of the fact that I can relate it to multiple things. And so on my custom form, I could just see them in one shot. It also reduced when trying to do reporting to related things. I don't have to go look at the out of the box one, which has tons and tons of records in it from relationships. I can just go to mine and I get real quick response coming back. It's just about the speed of response on the reports.
And there's one part of the design that I'm not sure that everybody got, but it's just a design decision that BMC made that for every relationship, it's not one record, it's 2 records. It's one in each direction.
Right. Right. But and that's custom form. You show your relationship back the other way. So that's actually what I'm saying I did there by having my own custom associations form. I'm doing the same thing out of the box did. So out of the box, if you relate a incident to a change, you are updating also the change associations as well as the incident associations in order to have it there. And so I'm essentially doing the exact same thing with my own custom. Technically, it creates 2 records, but I do it by a filter off my custom associations to say, go push it over here and manage that other association.
So you create your association and the filter
right.
creates the other association.
Right. And then rather than doing the same workflow that they do when you decide you want to delete that incident related to a change, where it goes to the change association and deletes it. And then turns around and hunts the incident association and changes it. And they do it in one chunk off the active link. I chose to just push the delete value, change the status to delete on my custom association, and let filter workflow take care of getting rid of the change association or so forth on it.
Curious, what custom form did you want to relate? What information do you want to relate to an incident to?
You would be surprised at how many custom things I have built and how many custom things that I have related. The one I'm showing here is called a CSUN's notification system. We built a custom notification system where they put in information that they want to make a broadcast type message to the world, not to a broadcast inside of Remedy scenario, that we have an outage happening right now on an incident, or that we're doing an activity next week. We're going to be patching a bunch of switches. And in our design of that project, they wanted people to subscribe to these notifications. And so they go through a NASA access management system and go subscribe to the different services and or centers that they want to know about. And so that information pushes in through an automated process and builds all the data I need to know whether or not you need to get an email for this thing. And so we need to be able to relate sometimes that CSUN's notification direct to an incident, so that project that they have picked, so that we can easily tie it all together. And
we use mids in the list. So,
yeah, and not everybody's in here has heard me talk about mid. A couple of them I've talked about mid, where we have created this middle system between the discovered CMDB data and our property data. And then we use the mid to maintain other information such as security plans for those devices, for those records. And so one of the problems with the CMDB, if you're using Discovery, is sometimes Discovery will just make a brand new instance ID. A TKU update can make it trigger to do it. Nothing else really changed about it. It'll make a whole new instance ID. And then eventually you'll delete the old instance ID. Well, if you did your relationship and your incident to the CI, which it uses instance ID to tag it, you'll still see the relationship entry in the incident. But when you double click on it, you get nothing because the record doesn't exist anymore inside the CMDB. But we've begun to train our people to relate the mid record, which is an entry that keeps up with it by device name as opposed to instance ID. And so that device name stays for us. And so now, even if they replace a router or a switch at some point and give it the same name that the one that it used to be, they are still seeing the same mid record connected to their incidents from the past. So that's just a couple of the examples that we're doing this with. We got some others that we deal with. We keep up with conference room data in a separate custom form, and we relate that kind of information. We keep up with billable circuits that we deal with and custom forms, and we relate those to incidents and change. So we got a lot of things that we're doing this with.
Great questions. Any other questions here in the room? See who we have on. We've got 6 folks in the. So we've got Marvin, Caddy, Christopher. Do any of you have any questions for Bob? And if you would like to ask a question, feel free to either type it in the chat or you can unmute your microphone. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to try to find that unmute button. There goes Christopher. Christopher, go ahead.
Well, it's Chris, but anyway, I just want to say I've really enjoyed all of your presentations this week. I mean, I think I'm taking back some very valuable information for me to work with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Bob's done some amazing things there at NASA. He's a tough act to work well, I won't say follow, but I've had the opportunity to work with Bob, and Bob is the king. For those of you who haven't heard me say this, Bob is the king of guides, filter guides specifically, but got guides that call guides based upon things like custom. So Bob said had a lot of development work here that he's done for his customers. So I'm very pleased.
Yeah, I think on Tuesday we chatted for about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I think we did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your comment. Caddy, Marvin, do either of you have a
Yeah,
question?
Marvin's in the room.
Oh, Marvin. Sorry, Marvin.
Marvin. Thank you, Marvin.
Thumbs up. Okay.
Marvin's good.
Just need to see closer of that.
That's Yeah.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Caddy, if you have a question, you may feel free to ask it. Otherwise, there you go. So Caddy's got her mic open. Go ahead, Caddy.
No, I don't have a question, but I might, because what Bob just detailed and went through, I might have some questions later. I'm going to try that. And I see his email, so I can send him a email. And I too I've thoroughly enjoyed. And I didn't think I would. I thought I'd be bored for 3 days, but I have not been bored. My brain's working overtime right now.
Well, thank you, Katie. That means we've at least tried to meet our goal of providing some useful information. And as you mentioned, you know, that these are like-minded folks in these sessions, and I think it's great. We've had a lot of great feedback from folks that have said, you know, there's not 2,000 people here, but it's nice to be able to walk up to Bob and have a 45-minute conversation, or walk up to Lenny and have a conversation about these different things. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you for presenting, Bob. Thank you all for your participation in this conference, both virtually and physically. I know that Lenny and I were initially thinking we're just going to have a two-person party here in Vegas, and then Bob joined us, and then Jason joined us, and then the rest of you decided to join. What we've actually tried to do to make it, what I tried to do is create the little promo videos. I'm not sure if that helped anyone get an idea of what they might be seeing. We tried not to give all of the information away, but we wanted to give you little teaser videos, you know, with Darius and with Bob and with, you know, with Joel and some of these folks. So we'll try to do that again next time. We'll try to do this in a little bit earlier time frame so that you have an idea of what to see. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming and participating. We look forward to doing this next year, whatever we call it.
Yeah, and I want to say thanks to all of you for sticking around for the last session of the whole thing. I mean, we've all been to a lot of these conferences over the years, and the very last sessions of the day, there's nobody. Everybody's left and gone home and everything. So I really appreciate y'all sticking around and coming to see my last session. There were, but he just took them.
And not a problem. It had to do with custom forms, and that's my bread and butter.
Excellent.
Well, and Caddy, you know, here's the thing that you don't see. We have a pretty packed room, and as Bob said, I mean, there are 2 chairs left here in this room. Other than that, we've got a full room here. So thanks again, everyone.
Yep.
Good job, you guys.
Good job.